2 reasons to get back to work on the Mustang: the emails to finish it are clogging up my computer, and the rust is about to make a permanent home. We still got a ways to go. The roll cage and tin work needs to be finished, along with the electronics and cooling system. Those are things that I can do. Brent's poised and ready to do the body work regardless. This thing isn't leaving the shop unless it's doing a power slide. These tires protrude 5.5 inches. The largest flares available for racing, a wimpy 3.5. The local awning company wouldn't even come out and check out our dilemma. So once again, we're on our own. And we're gonna do something that we've never done before: fiberglass construction. We learned enough to know what to buy: the fiberglass sheets and the resin we were told to get. And that's about it. We made a lot of calls and talked to a lot of people, and like all self-proclaimed artists, theirs is the only way to do it. But they did agree on one thing: you gotta have a mold to build on. All resins use an activator or a hardener. This stuff is like a bad marriage. When it's mixed together, it slowly destroys everything around it. This is an acid, and it'll eat away the foam and generate enough heat it could actually warp it. Now, there are some foams that could resist this better than others, but you gotta pay for it. One guy had an option we liked: florist foam. Its pores are fine enough to sand, it's light, and simply generates that warm and fuzzy feeling. It starts with a template as a base. We figured a 2-inch gap will be plenty for the limited wheel travel this car has. 2 sheets glued together will be a good start.
5 hours later.
If you think you're gonna learn some expert tips today, you're wrong. Right out of the box, our glue research failed. And the sweet little old lady at the hobby shop was not the right expert to ask. So we burned a day testing 7 different glues, but we found one. I'm not telling which one worked best, because we're not done yet. The foam is only 2 inches thick, so we started with 1 sheet at a time. The first block needs to mimic the contour. This foam was the right choice so far. We have total control with a simple cheese grater. Sandwiching more boards will create the thickness we need. To help hold the mold on the car, a stud gun and more glue. Mount the mold in place against the fender. This layer has a smaller radius and hangs lower to hug the shape of the tire. Once it's all in place, tape it down, let it dry. A can of expanding foam comes in handy to fill in the gap. Now we're ready to start cutting. The bigger chunks drop right off with the help of a hacksaw blade. A little slice here, a little shaving there, and the flare is starting to take shape. Brent's in his zone again, and I know I just have to leave him alone. In fact, that's pretty much been my involvement. The final contours are done with a grinder. Just don't take too much off, or you'll have to do some filling. These pieces, once they're finished, will give the Stang a sleeker profile. Drying time is enough to get some coffee and finish it off.
It's not bad for an experiment. I think it's about time for some glass.
But first, we need to keep our fiberglass from sticking to our foam. Now, our expert advisors, and I don't mean the little old lady down the street at the hobby shop, told us about some cheap releasing agents. You can use silicone, cooking spray, wax paper. Our choice? Aluminum foil. The foil needs to be stuck to the foam. Since we're working vertically, we don't want the fiberglass to end up on the floor, like your underwear after a long, hot day. Once you mix your resin with the hardener, you've got to work fast. So have your fiber cloth cut and your brush ready. Start by brushing a section, then lay on the cloth, and then slather on a thick layer of resin. Make sure you work in a well-ventilated area. This stuff can get nasty. And if you don't want to end up with hairy palms like Brent, wear some gloves. Air bubbles will weaken the structure. So if we're building a boat, we'd be worried about it. But this thing will never be near a lake, so it's not really a concern. Brent's not gonna let me play, and I don't know why, and I'm feeling a little threatened by this. So after the break, I'm gonna dazzle you with my mad skills at tin work. Glad you're back. So far, we've made a lot of progress with our experimental foam molds for our fender flares. We cut them, tacked them, shaped them, and even got the first layer of glass in place. While Brent worked his glass off, I cut out more body parts from around the rear wheels, making way for the tubs. Now they're gonna be complicated to put in because you got a lot of things in the way. The roll cage, the shocks, the rear end. You gotta work around all this stuff, but the tubs have to go in first because everything else builds off of them. We're making the tubs from 3 separate pieces. This angled piece will hold the side and top together. It's gotta fit just right since the rest of our tin builds off of the tubs. We measured our sides to be 2 inches longer than the tires and made cutouts for the axles and shocks. We added a couple of extensions, and with the shocks removed, we can go ahead and tack the sides into place. Slide the top portion into position and tack it in. One more piece to go. My tubs need to join up against the quarter panel, and following all these contours can be a huge pain. So I fabbed up this tool with a hole for the marker. You can run it against the contours while tracing the pattern on a template. Now, if this were a show car, I would have done this to the main section for looks. But for a race car, 2 pieces works best. A few tacks is all they get. Silicone keeps them from rattling and seals them up. And here's why. They're the first things to be crushed in a minor fender bender. If it was permanently attached to the tub, it could destroy the whole thing, ruining your day at the track. These, you just rip them out and you're running. Hence the name, crush panels. We're not even mentioning the word crush to Brent. He hasn't been around to experience the carnage of racing, and I doubt he'll want to watch the first time this thing kisses the wall. With 3 layers of glass and 2 gallons of resin, it's time to see if the tin foil will let us have it back. Man, I love that old lady at the craft store. Cutting and sanding fiberglass requires some thinking and planning. Those tiny airborne fibers can create several serious health problems. Airway and lung damage topping the list. Skin and eye irritation second. And not just for you, but anyone around it. So use proper respirators in a small confined area, and a very thorough cleanup is a must. Fitting a custom part just doesn't get any better than this. Look, Ma, no brackets. Well, not yet anyway. Simple sheet metal and pop rivets will keep them there. The first step in finishing it off is a fiberglass filler. Stronger than body filler, it strengthens the piece and fills in the larger imperfections. Another test fit for the final positioning, and the body brackets can be added. Brent's moving on pretty quick, and he still won't let me help. So I fabbed up the side panels, finished up the tub, and I'm getting ready to box in the fuel cell. Chris is finishing up the custom headers I started a few weeks back. The flare is far enough along for Brent to get back to a familiar territory, body filler. The fiberglass finish is rough, too rough to sand smooth. This mud is a polyester base, which means it's thicker than latex. Of course, in Brenttown, things don't move too fast. He did this 2 or 3 times. I never saw the difference, but he did. Some glaze and a layer of guide coat kept him busy for another hour. When he was happy, a couple of coats of primer. All that gave me just enough time to put in the second tub. Like every serious race car, the fuel cell needs to be isolated from the driver. This simple box will do that. Looks like I still have time to cut out the rest of the fender. You done with your science experiment?
Yeah.
Here, put it on, see what it looks like. Outstanding. You see any problems in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, you're doing the other side.
Another skill under our hats, and it was pretty cheap to make too. Floral foam, $60. Resonant fiberglass, $80. So for less than $200, we've got one side done. We're gonna make a mold of this thing so the spares are quick and easy to make, because we all know rubbing is racing. If you ain't rubbing, you ain't racing. Now Brent's got an idea for the front end. You'll see that in a little bit.
This week's MuscleCar Flashback, the 69 Yenko Supernova.
Don Yenko also worked his RPM magic on the Nova. In '69, he took 36 of them with factory 396s, making 375 horses, then put a 427 in it, transforming them into Yenko supercars.
First of all, grab a hold of the steering wheel, because with these tires, the back end's going to go a lot of different directions, and it'll push you back in the seat.
They were super because the L72 that was dropped in was rated at 425 horse. But in reality, it probably made more. 0 to 60 in the 4-second range. Some collectors believe it's the fastest Yenko ever built. Don called them lethal because the car only weighed 3,400 pounds with stock suspension. But all that power made your insurance agent sweat. Owner Clint Ernst knows.
This car is a beast. It's the lightest that they put the 427 in, and the cars can be very difficult to handle when you really get into it.
The 427 was stuffed in the Nova, but they kept the factory 396 heads and intake, giving it 11-to-1 compression, an M21 close ratio 4-speed, and a Positrack with a 410 gear in a 12-bolt housing. The usual badging front and rear, and no stripes letting you know it was a Yenko.
It's a surprising car because it can be very docile and very easy to drive in traffic, but when you get out and really want to get on the car, it's all ready to go.
The interior is all business. No frills, just black vinyl seats, a few Stewart Warner gauges, and some headrest decals, and that's it. This baby isn't about looking pretty, it's about going fast. Competition in the day came from the Boss Mustangs and Dodge Darts, but they never saw this sleeper till it was too late. Don Yenko cast a large shadow over the performance car market from '67 up until 1982 when he retired.
I think he built some fabulous cars for the time. He was really Mr. Performance for that period of time. There were certainly other dealerships that were doing similar things, but the Yenko was the one that people really recognized.
You want to talk rare? Out of the original 36 Supernovas from '69, only 8 are known to exist today, and this is one of them. For a car you could drive off the lot for about $4,400 bucks, its estimated worth today, $300 grand and higher. But for Cliff, it all comes down to one thing.
Just a blast to drive. Yes, it's rare, but you got to have some fun with them too.
We'll be right back after the break. We're back. We've got the rest of today and next week to get this baby up and running. Our first stab at fiberglass flares for the rear went surprisingly well, so Brent's redesigning the front. We got these fiberglass fenders from Mustang Plus. They were already flared, but we went a little crazy on our track width. So we're cutting them up and redoing the flares. This may sound stupid, but check your turn radius first. More floral foam creates the awnings that act as molds. We all know how long it's going to take Brent to do that, so I'm diverting the engine to hook it up. For the low ride height, we converted a dry sump oil pan to a wet sump, which means the oil pump is now external. This one came from Peterson Fluid Systems. It's a G-rotor designed for racing. A custom bracket is needed to get it where it needs to be, out of the way of everything else and aligned with the crank pulley. You want to keep the draw in the engine to a minimum. This one doesn't require much, but it puts out 6 times more than a stock one. Only two things will draw off the crank, the second being the power steering pump. Lightweight and small because the reservoir is mounted elsewhere. The water pump is electric, zero drain on the engine. This one's from Moroso. It flows 21% more than stock and is 12 volt or 16 volt compatible. And to cool all that water, a Flexolite aluminum radiator. Two electric fans eliminate a manual one, leaving more room to angle our radiator, more surface area, more cooling. Another part that's normally powered by the crankshaft is the alternator. And those clever racers found a way around that too. They started using smaller ones from foreign cars. They weigh less, they take up less room. And PowerMaster took that a step further. Using the drive shaft to turn it isn't new, but this kit's yoked with a pulley and brackets made for a specific rear end make belt alignment a no-brainer. Most of the parts with weight are already in the car. These bars are for the main hoop and the doors. I'm not finishing it up yet, I'm just placing them where they will be. No, I'm not lollygagging. We need to get close to the finished weight so the correct shocks and springs can be ordered. We tried to keep the weight balanced, but these scales on all fours will tell us the results. Sandbags will act as the driver and the fuel. This is the total weight of the car, 2715. This is the weight over the front wheels, this is the weight over the rear, but this is the number that's important. 50% of the weight over the front wheels. This is perfect. This is why we set the engine back as far as we did. Now I'll take this info, call Bilstein, and with their charts, they'll give us the correct shocks for the application. After that, I'll call AFCO and we'll get our springs. The electrics are too complicated to start today. Our driver's comfy, and Brent's moving on to his third coat. But I'm out of here for now. Next week, we're gonna finish that thing up. Hey, how much longer are you gonna be here?
About 30 to the hizzle.
That's house for the older crowd. Later.